Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are going to finish up with Thomas of Woodstock today by hearing from King Richard II and all today in Act 5, Scene 6. All, like everybody just echoes one line that King Richard II says, so I figured to just smush it all together and then we can wrap up this play. But so the things that happened, Woodstock was killed. The people who killed him were killed by soldiers of the Pool, and then the Pool had those bodies dumped in a river, and then the Pool got a bunch of French soldiers and brought them to England to back up Richard, which gave Richard enough confidence to mount an attack against his uncles instead of just like staying somewhere and building up a stronghold. So there was a bunch of smack talk back and forth, but then on the battlefield, Green was killed and King Richard was very upset about that. So he is sort of in mourning, and King Richard's side did not have enough troops to take on the uncles. So they were losing badly, and the flatterers were like, we need to retreat. We need to get back to the tower because we're losing. And then we also had Nimble and Tressilian, who ran away because they saw that a bunch of King Richard's other soldiers were just running away. And for the sake of their own safety, they thought that it would be better to disguise themselves and get out of Dodge. But in Act 5, Scene 5, we saw Tressilian and Nimble again, and Nimble is like, you know what? I have to turn him in. So he takes Tressilian prisoner so that he can turn him in and receive a pardon and receive a reward and all that stuff. So that brings us to Act 5, Scene 6, where we are at the Lord's camp, and we've got Lancaster, Arundel, Surrey, Cheney, and some soldiers, and they bring in Lepoole, Bushy, and Scroop, who've all been taken prisoner. And Lancaster is like, which one of us can tell you where Bagot ran off to? And Arundel thinks he went to Bristow, so Lancaster's like, send people there to look for him because we just need Bagot and Tressilian, and then we've got everybody, so we're good. Like, we'll have all of the flatterers, then they'll be taken care of. So we just need those two, Bagot and Tressilian. At which point, Nimble comes in with Tressilian in tow because Tressilian is his prisoner, and he's like, check it out, I caught this guy, I arrested him. And he uses a lot of very incorrect legal terminology as he's trying to show off his prowess in how he was able to capture Tressilian. And Arundel is like, yes, but what made you turn on Tressilian so that you're turning him in? And this is where things get really interesting, because by many accounts of what I was able to find online about this play, this is about the point that the play cuts off and we don't have any more of it. Nimble starts to say that he brought in Tressilian because of these proclamations that he had seen, which are basically like, you know, wanted posters where they're like, wanted, Tressilian, reward, like Old West type stuff, but before the Old West. So Nimble had seen all of these flyers saying that Tressilian was a wanted man. So Nimble says that that's the first reason why he chose to turn in Tressilian. And then in the original manuscript, nothing else exists past that. But the Shakespeare Pro app that I have has an ending. I have no idea who wrote that ending, which in fairness, we don't know who wrote the rest of the play, so that kind of makes sense. But the ending that exists in the Shakespeare Pro app is also not the same ending that won the Hampshire Shakespeare Company's contest, but you can find that one online if you want to go and check that out. But because I have easiest access to the Shakespeare Pro app, that's the ending that we're going to talk about, is the one that's in there, wherever it is that this came from. Maybe the Shakespeare Pro people just decided that they needed to put a button on some things. So this is one possible ending from here on out. If you've ever seen the movie Clue, picture one of those title cards. This is one possible ending. And then you can go digging online and find some of the other ones. So anyway, things get interesting from here. We have Nimble saying that he turns in Tressilian, first because of the proclamation saying that he's a wanted man, and second for the reward that he will get for catching a wanted man, and third because Tressilian ordered Woodstock's death. Dun, dun, dun. So he pulls out a piece of parchment and he hands it to Lancaster. And this parchment is the arrest warrant for Woodstock that is signed by Tressilian that says, you know, make his death look like it was an accident. And the uncles are like, nope, this blah. So they have Tressilian taken off so that he can be executed since he was the one that ordered the death of Woodstock. So he goes off or is taken off, and then Lancaster turns to the flatterers, to the remaining flatterers, to find out what they know about Woodstock's death. And Scroop is like, LePoole did it. And LePoole is like, no, it was a couple of random murderers who came in, but I threw those bodies into the sea, so oh no, we'll never know. And Arundel is like, so you're responsible for murdering 3 people. And LePoole is like, I was just following the orders of the king, which perks up the ears of all of the uncles, because they're like, haha, we got him. We have somebody to corroborate that Woodstock's death was actually King Richard's fault. So Chaney goes off to get King Richard, and Bushy and Scroop are like, yeah, the king did it. It was the king's orders. The king ordered the death. And King Richard is brought in handcuffs. And York turns to him and he's like, okay, you are our king, but we're mourning the death of our brother right now. So we need to figure out what we're doing here. And Richard is like, yeah, I'm mourning him too. He was a good man. And Lancaster says, your flatterers basically ratted you out. They threw you under the bus, even though buses didn't exist back then. He's like, your flatterers gave you up. And Richard is like, they're liars. You can't trust anything that they say. And Lancaster's like, yeah, but whatever. Woodstock is still dead. So how did that happen? And Richard's like, well, I failed to save him. So the uncles are now like, okay, Richard says that he didn't do it. He says that they acted without his knowledge. They're saying that he said that it was done. We have this thing, but also he's the king, but Woodstock was our brother. And Richard is like, I am also your family and also your king. So ultimately, Lancaster decides to pardon Richard, but he's going to have LePoole executed along with Tressilian. But Lancaster warns Richard that even though he's being set free, he needs to govern better. So they take off Richard's handcuffs, and Richard's like, okay, what do I have to do to govern better? And Arundel is like, well, you have to get rid of your flatterers, first of all. Then you need to cancel the proclamations of treason against your uncles, and then bring your uncles back into court to be your advisors, and then everything will be fine. Like, we'll be back where we were at the beginning, as if none of this had ever happened. So Richard does those things. He's like, okay, flatterers be gone, and these proclamations don't exist anymore, and please come back to court. And Surrey turns to Richard and he's like, there's also the matter of the blank charters. Do you want to maybe get rid of those too? And Richard replies, we do repent us now of those blank charters. Repeal the law and further here proclaim, we grieve most sore the death of our protector, good, plain, and loving Thomas, villainously slain. Redeemed, restored, and renewed, we vow in fresh humility our realm to crown, with justice, truth, and amity of God. No more a pelting farm, yet once again an England that's a royal seat of kings. God save the soul of Thomas Woodstock. God save the soul of Thomas Woodstock. And now, my lords, to Windsor, if you will, for there awaits, we hear, the commons and the peers, with whom we would be sweetly reconciled, that peace may claim new fruits and harvests mild. Away, let neither king nor kingdom stand, forever now a joyous, happier land. And that is how the version in the Shakespeare Pro app ends. So he's just the basics of it. He's saying, okay, we'll get rid of the blank charters too, and we're grieving for Thomas, which is really sad, but then Lancaster gives him his crown back, so he's like, okay, now I'm king, and I'm going to rule the best way that I know how, now that I'm like not just a landlord to England anymore, I'm an actual king, this is going to be a royal place. And everybody's like, God save Thomas of Woodstock. And he's like, okay, now let's all go back to Windsor and we can meet with the people and we can smooth everything over and quell their fears and squash this rebellion, and everything is going to be happy and hunky-dory from here on out. So it's a little bit of a tidy, neat bow that things get wrapped up in that I don't know meshes with the historical context of what happened and where things need to go. Now, granted, no Shakespeare play is 100% historically accurate. There are historians who look at Shakespeare's plays because as they have gone through historical documents, there will be records of like, it rained this day and so was born this day and so killed so on that day. But it doesn't get into like the why of so killing so. So historians will sometimes look at Shakespearean plays to be like, oh, actually that rationale makes sense for why that played out that way. So with an ending like this, where King Richard is forgiven for Woodstock's death, that makes the beginning of Shakespeare's King Richard II a little bit weird. And with the dismissal of the flatterers at the end of this play, that also makes King Richard II a little bit weird, because those flatterers still exist and are still a problem in King Richard II as it was written by Shakespeare. So I'm not sure where this ending came from. I do sort of like the dun dun dun, I'm turning him in because he signed the order to have Woodstock killed. But again, that makes King Richard II not really make sense, the first scene, because there's the thing, you did this, but you killed Woodstock and all of that stuff. You killed the Duke of Gloucester. So maybe a little bit of an unsatisfactory ending, but it's also a little bit of like this is a proper Hollywood ending where everybody reconciles and we're basically back to where we were at the beginning, where England is going to prosper and be great, even if that's not necessarily historically accurate. But in general, I enjoyed this play, and I enjoyed the insight into what happens before King Richard II as it exists, as Shakespeare wrote it. It's kind of cool to see the backstory of Thomas of Woodstock and why accusing the king of his murder at the beginning of King Richard II is as big a deal as it is. Historically, I don't think that they've decided whether or not the king was responsible for Woodstock's death. It might have been in an actual historical context, but I don't know that there was ever like concrete proof found that that's what happened. So it's just interesting to see some of the speculation and some of what might have driven the speculation to become what it was. I think that Woodstock, while he is a nice, upstanding, honest, plain character, he's maybe a little too caricature-ish in that respect. He does get to have a couple little moments. He loses his temper once or twice, which is, just a nice layer that gets added into him. But just his staunch doing things by the book and doing things the correct way does make him a little bit stiff. I do think that there are parts of this play that could use an editor, which is why I'm not sure that it strikes me as a Shakespearean play. I think that Shakespeare is very judicious with how much time he spends on each plot point, whereas this one, the flatterers say that they're going to spend all kinds of money, and then Woodstock hears that they're going to, and then we see them spending the money, and then Woodstock hears that they've spent all the money. Those sorts of things. It's a little bit belabored and a little bit, beating of a dead horse. And the language in this, I'm not sure. I pointed out a couple of times in a couple of the videos places where people broke into rhyme, including this monologue today. King Richard rhymes a couple of times towards the end, and I'm not sure that those verse techniques are used as skillfully as Shakespeare might have used them. So I'm not sure if this one is his or not, but I still enjoyed reading it. I enjoyed working through it. I enjoyed digging into it, and I hope you did too. If you have any thoughts, please leave them in the comments. And tomorrow we are going to start in on the tragedy of the reign of King John, or something along those lines. It's another version of King John. Shakespeare wrote King John. This is another version. So we'll also get to take a look at the similarities and the differences between the two, which will be another fun experiment. So anyway, I'll see you tomorrow for new play day. Mwah.